All right, when you think about what starts a war, you're probably picturing big things, right? Land, power, ideology. But what if I told you about a war that got its name from a bucket? Yeah. Today we're diving into the strange and totally fascinating story of the War of the Bucket.
I mean, seriously, think about that for a second. Could a real war, we're talking thousands of soldiers, real battles, people actually dying, really kick off just because someone stole a bucket from a well? It sounds like a joke, doesn't it?
But believe it or not, back in 1325, that's kind of what it looked like on the surface. Two powerful Italian city-states, Bologna and Modena, officially declared war on each other. And yeah, armies were marched and battle lines were drawn.
So let's get into it. To really figure out what happened, we've got to start with the legend, the story that gave this whole conflict its crazy name, a story people have been telling for almost 700 years. So the popular story, the one you'll hear everywhere, it's super simple. It's almost like something out of a movie. You've got Modenese soldiers, right? They sneak into the enemy city of Bologna, they grab an old wooden bucket from a well in the town square, and they make a run for it. And Bologna, they are so furious, so insulted by this theft that they declare all-out war just to get their bucket back. It's a great story, but it's not exactly what happened.
Yeah, the truth, as it usually is a whole lot more complicated, a lot more political. The real spark for this war, it wasn't a bucket, it was a castle.
And here's the big twist, the thing that flips the whole story on its head. The bucket wasn't the cause of the war at all. It was a trophy. The Modenese grabbed it after the fighting was already over, basically to rub salt in the wound.
Okay, so if it wasn't the bucket, what was the real trigger? Well, the actual reason for the war, the casus belli as they say, was that Modena had just captured a super important Bolognese castle called Monteviglio. Now, back in the 14th century, losing a strategic fortress like that was a huge deal. Way more serious than, some well-ward hardware.
But you know what? Even a captured castle doesn't really give us the full picture. To get why these two cities were constantly at each other's throats, we need to zoom way out and look at the massive political showdown that had been tearing northern Italy apart for centuries. You see, this little war wasn't really just about Bologna and Modena. It was just one small, bloody chapter in this huge 300-year-long conflict between two massive rival factions that were fighting for control of Italy, the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. And it all boiled down to this fundamental split. On one side, you had the Guelphs, that was Bologne's team, and they supported the power of the Pope. And on the other side, you had the Ghibellines, Modena's crew, and they backed the Holy Roman Emperor. So this wasn't just a local squabble. It was basically a proxy war for the soul of Italy. And look, this thing didn't just pop up overnight. The bad blood had been simmering for a long, long time. Bologna had already grabbed some territory from Modena way back in 1296. Then, just a few months before the war, Bologna sent troops to raid and burn Modenese fields. So when that key castle, Monteviglio, was betrayed and fell to Modena in September 1325, well, that was the final straw. War was coming, no question about it. So all of this tension, all of this history, it finally just exploded. And it all came down to one single decisive battle that would go down in history, the Battle of Zappolino. Okay, let's look at the players. On the Guelph side, for Bologna, you've got Fulcieri da Caboli leading the charge. And for the Ghibellines, Modena's army was commanded by Passerino de Bonacolsi. But honestly, the commanders aren't the main story here. It's the sheer size of their armies. The difference is, well, it's just staggering. Just get a load of this mismatch. Bologna rolls up with this massive army of 32,000 soldiers. Modena, meanwhile, could barely scrape together 7,000. They were outnumbered more than 4-1. I mean, on paper, this should have been an absolute slaughter, a total blowout. But here's the thing. Despite facing these totally insane odds, the Modenese army didn't just cower behind their city walls. Nope. In what has to be one of the boldest moves ever, they marched right out to meet the invaders head-on, deep in Bolognese territory, at a place called Zappolino. And then the unthinkable happened. That tiny Modenese force completely, utterly crushed the massive Bolognese army. The bigger army just broke and ran. The numbers are just wild. Bologna lost around 2,500 soldiers. That's 5 times the losses of Modena. It was a shocking, absolutely humiliating defeat for the bigger army. So, after a victory that nobody saw coming, what happens next? Well, this is where we finally get back to that infamous stolen trophy. And here it is. This is the moment our bucket finally makes its grand entrance. After chasing the Bolognese army all the way back to their own city gates, the victorious Modenese soldiers, as one last act of total mockery, just grabbed the plain old wooden bucket from a well right outside the walls. And they took it home with them as the ultimate symbol of their incredible victory. And this wasn't just some souvenir they forgot about. No way. That bucket was taken back to Modena and put on proud display in the city's main bell tower, the Torre della Ghirlandina. And it stayed there for centuries as this constant, in-your-face reminder of their impossible win. The story of this crazy battle and its quirky trophy became the stuff of legend. It actually inspired a famous epic poem in the 17th century called The Stolen Bucket. It even became an opera written by the composer Antonio Salieri. The small, weird war was literally immortalized in art. So in the end, yeah, the War of the Bucket sounds pretty silly, but it was anything but. It was a real violent and important battle. It was just one memorable chapter in a much, much larger saga of power, politics, and the fight for the future of Italy. And it really makes you think, doesn't it? How many other huge conflicts in history are remembered not for the grand political reasons they started, but for some small, seemingly random object that just happened to become the symbol of the whole thing?